David Lammy, the Foreign Minister of UK, the official title, I think, Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs of the Commonwealth. It's a very complicated name, is it? Anyway, we call him Foreign Minister. It is a little bit unusual because usually we don't have one-to-one with sitting officials. We do have that with the head of states when we go to their countries, and but we avoid having one-to-one with sitting ministers because we hope they go back to their jobs. We don't them, to lose their jobs or anything. But this is not the case here because I must say David is a friend, and I personally like David because he did something unusual. He became a minister less than 1 year, but he managed to visit 7 African countries and in Africa. And that is more than all the foreign ministers in the last 20 years in the history of the UK. So it seems UK trying to get back in Africa after long absence. For a long time, I think the only presence here in Africa really was something from David and the BBC. These are the only guys we see here. So welcome, and you come with some really flying colors here for visiting refugee camps and many African countries. You have been having a wide consultation to define your Africa approach. Can you tell us about this, please?
Well, look, first of all, thank you very much, Mo, for asking me to come and to be an exception.
It's very courageous of you to come, Okay.
And I always get nervous when someone starts by saying they're a friend, because I'm expecting the punches very shortly. But look, I'm very proud. Next month, I'll have been in politics in the UK for 25 years. And I was very proud to serve in the previous era as a junior minister in the Labour government of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And they were, in that period, very focused on Africa. But what I knew in coming into office back in July of last year is that the focus back then, 25 years ago when I started, was very much on development. And my sense was, coming to the continent so many times over the adult period of my life, and also reflecting on points of view in the global south, my own family stemming from Guyana and the Caribbean, was that actually the focus now has to be, what is the subject of this conference? It's about finance, it's about investment. It's about the opportunities that come to deal with some of the issues around debt and other issues. And so that was why we launched 6 months or so ago a listening exercise. We described it as the African approach, to hear what countries across the continent had to say and their governments, what civil society and NGOs and the public and others had to say to us, what they want from a UK government and how that has changed. And it did chime. What they're saying is, for us, it's about no longer being a donor, it's about investment. What they're saying is, can you please leverage the City of London and your finance institutions? They are worried about multilateralism. They recognise the UK can play a role. What are you doing on the World Bank? What are you doing on the IMF? These are the conversations they're wanting us to have. They're not asking us to depart from development. They are raising that, but they want the development to change. And they see real opportunities on energy, on climate, on finance. and a focus on the things that Britain does well, education being number one there, tech, opportunities where we can support in areas like AI. That's what we're hearing.
Okay, that's interesting. So will that become now your policy? You finished the consultation or you're still consulting?
Well, chiming with being here today, we are publishing the results of what we have been told, and we will be responding over the coming months. I will be back in the continent. Look, regardless of launching a new approach, it's been important for me to be in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Tunisia, here in Morocco, and in Morocco, signing 11 new memorandums of understanding, many of them dealing with investment, trade, and opportunities that exist here, but doing the same when I went to Nigeria, doing the same when I was in South Africa, because in the end, this has got to be more than just talk. It's got to be about creating better opportunities for the continent, but also for my country and the country that I represent.
Excellent. So what we hear here is UK is back into Africa, but not as a colonial force, but as a partner or a friend now. That's what you're trying to do.
Well, I would sum it up by saying it's certainly about partnership, not paternalism. It is about being an investor, not a donor. And what we heard, and we asked Nairi Woods to do some work for us when we came into government, and what we...
Nairi Woods is here, actually, I think.
He's here. What we were hearing when we spoke to partners in the Global South is listening more and a bit less talking.
That's good. That's good. No, that's excellent. You talked in the past about illicit financial flows out of Africa, and you have a position there. Now you are a minister, influential minister in the government. What UK is going to do about this? UK had, of course, a bad reputation before about being a center of money laundering and all kind of nonsense. You guys trying to clean your acts now. So what you going to do about illicit financial flows? This seems to be a problem. I mean, Europe, in the last Africa-Europe summit, the European Union signed and said, we had a resolution, we're going to work on stopping illicit financial flow. And Charles Michel signed that. I think Charles Michel is here. Charles Michel, he's a swimming pool. Okay. He signed that, trust me, he signed it. And till now they have done nothing about it. So, what you propose to do about illicit financial flows?
Well, Mo, let me just, because this is important, and I just want to say on a personal level, I'm not just here as the UK Foreign Secretary, I'm here also as the Member of Parliament for Tottenham. And in representing Tottenham, which is a very diverse part
Congratulations, by the way. Okay.
of North London, and my team.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I don't like his team because I support Arsenal.
Yeah, well,
as a sportsman.
Let's not talk.
I have to congratulate him. Okay.
Let's not talk about that. But in representing Tottenham, illicit money, driving drugs, driving knives, driving guns, driving people. So as a Member of Parliament confronted with some of the issues that wash up on the shores of London, and particularly London's inner city communities, is what it very much is something that I was reflecting on whilst we were in opposition, and actually drawing on some of the work that you were raising about what was going on in this continent and the money being stolen from populations. This, I think, reached a pretty acute level in the UK when we were looking at the issues of illicit finance, particularly associated with the proximity to the beginning of the war in Ukraine and Russian illicit finance that was washing around London and nothing was being done to it. There's something about beneficial ownership and being clear and transparent about whose money, where in the world it is, and having proper registers for that money, And I recognize that there's a responsibility too for Britain
Yeah,
and
but
its
one
overseas
question
territories.
about that register. My understanding is that that register is not made public. My understanding is that the Parliament and the British government then said we'll only open it to competent bodies, relevant competent bodies. Now, if I'm a dictator in an African country, say, I stole a lot of money and put it on these trustee companies, wherever they are, and now you have the data, the beneficial ownership. You know, I bought so many things in, Chelsea and London, nice homes or whatever, like the Russians did. And do you think I'm going to ask my tax authority to ask you to open your register? Of course not.
Well, the starting principle is that the sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. You're absolutely right. There was some legislation passed under the last government. I'm not sure it went far enough.
Cameron, yes.
And under David Cameron's government. And I think it is certainly the case that whilst there's been actually quite good progress across British overseas territories, there is still some work to do in some of our overseas territories, which we are picking up. But I've just appointed Margaret Hodge, who was the chair of our National Audit Committee in Parliament, to be our envoy on this issue. We're hoping that it will culminate in a conference next year. And by the way, enforcement is important.
Yeah.
And our National Crime Agency is going after people. We've had some good results with money that's gone astray in Angola, money that's gone astray in Nigeria. There is more work to do. It's 11 months, we started, but on the agenda that you've set out, you have my pledge. If I'm back here in 3 or 4 years' time, there'll be more progress.
Will be done. Can we have it less than 4 years?
Well, you could have either less than 4 years. You could spot check where we've got to.
Okay. It's just to make sure everybody is aware of what you're talking about. There is a big issue about these beneficial ownerships where people hide their assets in companies offshore, where ownership is opaque, nobody knows, trustee companies, and that's where the stolen money is in. Not only corrupt people, corrupt business people, corrupt leaders, but it's drug dealers, criminals, etc. And we always raise the issue, who need a beneficial, these opaque companies? No legitimate business need that. No legitimate person needs that. And so a great push. People started to move, but unfortunately, there are all these issues, we have the register, but we keep it, secret unless a legal authority asks for it. I mean, it doesn't work. And it was so ridiculous when you had the problem between Europe and Russia, and you can watch all these European governments and who owns this mansion? Is this boat belongs to Putin? Because they don't know. After they pass this law, still they don't know. This is a joke. I think people, if they say make a stand, please be serious about fighting corruption and fighting illicit financial flow is more complex because it's legal. People need to introduce regulations and rules to stop it. Mispricing and profit shifting. G20 asked OECD to do some work, and we didn't see any output. Nothing happens.
Yeah, look, I don't pretend that the system has been opaque, but I do stand by the investment that we're putting into the National Crime Agency. And I think if you look at the sanctions regime and the way I've used it in the last 10, 11 months, you'll see that I'm going after those who are stealing money and hiding it.
And you are in a good position to really push for this stuff. So please, go on, have a fight with those people. Get it done. Tell Starmer, come on, get act together. Yeah? Thank you very much. Another issue here, which actually, as a Sudanese, I'm originally Sudanese, as you know, I'm really grateful because you did few good things for Sudan, which no other foreign minister did. You went to the refugee camps, thank you. You went to New York to try to get a Security Council resolution. It didn't work, unfortunately. Was it the Russians who, I think, stopped it? You got 14-1. You did not manage to get it through, but though it's very strange. Did the Russians tell you why they are vetoing your resolution?
Well, look, I mean, I think, let us be crystal clear.
This is the place to be crystal clear. Yeah, please.
If you're sitting in my role as the UK Foreign Secretary, clearly the bandwidth in terms of conflict across the world is intense. We have war in Europe, we have an ongoing crisis in the Middle East, we have internal conflict sadly engulfing many countries in this continent, challenges in the Indo-Pacific. So the bandwidth is being stretched. Notwithstanding that, the crisis in Sudan and that flows from Sudan is the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world currently, and it is a matter of deep, deep concern that there has been an ambivalence, equivocation, and certainly an absence of exposure to this crisis globally and across much of the Western world.
It's true. It's true.
And so that is why I made up my mind very early in office that I would do all I could as UK Foreign Secretary to draw attention to this crisis. And if you look at my feed on X, Sudan is number one. Why has the world forgotten this crisis?
Actually, there are few Sudanese here, so you are getting some brownie points now.
Well, why are the lives of the women and the children? And obviously it makes you very emotional thinking about it. The women and the children that I met in Chad, women being burned, raped. Why is there this moral ambiguity? Where is the liberal outrage on Sudan? I had hoped that we would get that resolution passed. We had 14 countries that were supporting it, 15, until the morning before when Russia changed their minds. And I hope that the resolution will come again to the UN. Of course there should be a resolution on this.
But what we don't understand, on what grounds, when somebody veto, I never been to the Security Council and I'll never be there, but when somebody says a veto, they give reasons. You were asking the resolution, if I remember correctly, was asking for peace, ceasefire, and access for humanitarian relief. Why the bloody Russians veto this?
Well, I think you'll see in the clip, if you look at it, that the Russian representative was on his phone during much of the debate. It was a very deep lack of respect for the institution. And there was some equivocation about some of the language, but I'm afraid no one accepted. And by the way, this was not just the UK. We were working in partnership with Sierra Leone to bring this resolution. But I didn't give up there. We had a conference in London.
Last month you had a conference in
Last
London.
month.
Yeah, tell us about that conference.
Well, the conference, we were not starting on the basis that we were going to solve this crisis, but we were starting on the basis, let us bring those engaged in the crisis and the international players that have some leverage on this crisis around the table. And we did that.
We had the European Union.
We had the European Union. Importantly, we had the African
Union, the peace and security people.
We had Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, we had Kenya, we had Uganda.
We had Germany,
We had
France.
Germany, France. We think, the United
All
States.
the people
of course.
involved,
We
except
had,
Russia and Iran, because those guys, and Turkey, because those guys are also involved. You know that. Anyway, they're not your friends, I know. They will not have come anyway. Okay.
no, Turkey is our very
Turkey is
good friend.
okay, but the other
Turkey
guys,
is our very good
the
friend.
other guys would not have come.
No. We had those around the table that we thought could shift this thing at that moment. And let us be clear, we did get a pledge of 800 million, which is important in terms of the crisis day to day, the humanitarian crisis, an extra 800 million, of which the UK has pledged 120 million. We got language around humanitarian protection, which is essential. I'm sad that we did not achieve agreement on the communique. But look,
What's the
let me
problem
just
with
finish
the
this point.
communique?
Diplomacy is failing every day until it succeeds, and I want to just be clear, we are not giving up on Sudan.
But we need to understand, please, David, don't rush here. What was wrong with the communique? Why certain countries did not refuse to sign?
Well, I think there was disagreement over language and descriptions of institutions in the communique that could not get agreement from some of the Arab League countries that were there.
Okay, I am aware, you don't want to mention them, that Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Egypt, the three countries refused to sign. Is that correct?
What I'm not going to do,
Everybody knows that. I mean,
let me explain what I'm not going to do. As the UK's chief diplomat, as a country that wants to be there for the people of Sudan, I will continue to work with all partners on this issue, recognizing as complex it is. I'm going to keep my hands.
shall I give him a pass, or what do you guys think? I mean, at least as a Sudanese, I cannot understand how our Arab neighbors refuse to sign a communique like that, which is just trying to collect a communication group, essentially. These are our neighbors, our brothers and sisters. Three Arab countries refused to sign. The African Union signed, the European Union signed, France, England. What is wrong with Arabs? What is their problem? I don't understand. Why didn't...
I've just seen my old friend Joseph Borrell, who is no longer in his job. Ask him afterwards.
Joseph actually was, you missed him. Joseph was amazed yesterday. He stood up and talked about everything. I'll have to wait until the Labour gets out of power, Conservative comes back, and then I'll bring you here again so you can speak freely. Anyway, I hope that takes some time anyway. Okay, let us move on with that. But what are you going to do going forward? You are not giving up.
No, I'm not giving up. We're not giving up on Sudan. Obviously, the humanitarian situation remains number one. Protection of civilians remains number two. There are real issues in country about the aid that is there and the support that is required, getting to the places that's needed. And obviously, ultimately, this won't be solved without some sort of political process. And I think the real danger is that the major actors in Sudan are even losing control of the groups underneath them.
Yes.
And the Sudan that we know and love sort of disintegrates really into a totally failed state. So with all seriousness, as someone whose heritage is deeply from that country, this is a very, very bleak.
Awful. We cannot see a light in that tunnel. Anyway, I can see we have Hamdok here, the last democratic prime minister of the country. I think we have Yasser Arman. We have, I think Abdul Wahid is here. Is Abdul Wahid here? Anyway, those few Sudanese here, maybe if you want to have a time to talk with them to see where we go from here. It's very bleak. Let's move on from Sudan then, just some other areas.
Yes.
Look, I mean, we talked in this conference mainly about Africa now taking care of itself. We said, really, we should not rely on aid or whatever. However, I appreciate aid help solve some humanitarian issues. Your government cut aid from 0.7% to 0.5%. That was not your government. That was the government before you. You guys objected to that at the time. And then 2 years later, you are in power. You cut that from 0.5% to 0.3%. And not only you, most of Europe cut the aids. And those guys in US, I think, just destroyed US aid. I mean, this sudden cut is rather brutal. And people can die as a result because there is no time for us to see how we're going to resolve this. Tedros is here from WHO, and he was telling us about the stress they have in the WHO now, how to deal with this crisis, especially their funding themselves is also cut. I don't want to go too much into the domestic policy of UK or why you want to do defense on expense, but it's just a few points. But I mean, this 0.7% actually was enshrined in a law, in a Parliament Act. Correct? It's a Parliament Act with a law. Are you guys acting illegally? You have no right to cut this unless you go and change the law.
Let's just. There's no question of us acting outside of the law. There really isn't. But let's just look panoptically at the subject, because it's an important subject.
I know some NGOs are taking you to court, actually. I think one of the NGOs here, I think it is one who's taking you to court. Is that correct?
It's an important subject. No doubt about it. There are governments in Western democracies who have made a political decision to abandon development aid entirely, and there are political parties. I am on the centre-left of the political spectrum, but there are political parties totally rejecting any commitment to aid and development at all. And I want to make that is happening.
We understand the political. We understand. And I'm not arguing about 0.7 or 0.5 now. My question, David, is simple. Are you breaking the law or not?
No.
Or is something you want to give to your lawyers?
No. And let me be absolutely clear. My government is fundamentally committed to playing a role in development, and even with the changes that we've made, we will still be the 6th biggest development spender globally. Let's be clear about that. And we are committed to getting back to higher numbers when we get back to growth in our economy. But let me just make another point. Let me just make another point, which is important. We have made a decision, it was a difficult decision, to finance defense spending in part by a small cut to development. But I do challenge this assumption that for a country like the United Kingdom to spend on defense is somehow impoverishing the continent of Africa. The war in Ukraine has cost the African continent in terms of food insecurity, Sadly, drone innovation,
Ask the European
billions.
Union how much.
Up to 7 billion and
Ask
beyond.
Borrell, I mean, how much of the funding got left Africa, European Union shifted a huge amount of money.
So when you look at the accordion of hard power through to development spend, soft power, culture, organisations like British Council, language, and through to diplomacy, of course. You look at that umbrella, at that family, and you look over the last 60 or 70 years, there have been fluctuations between that. And this is a period where the United Kingdom does have to invest in hard power. And that hard power sometimes has to complement our insistence, particularly on the rules-based order. So that's what we're doing.
We are not
but we remain committed to development.
David, we're not trying to tell you where to spend your money. Fine.
No, but there's another point that I want to make. Yeah. There is another point that I want to make. I do want to say this. There has been a necessary debate about development that we need to have. Here I want to make two distinctions. One between humanitarian assistance in the context of crisis, hurricane, typhoon, floods, which will always be necessary from countries who can support. That's one thing. But it is also important, look, when I did this Africa approach, what people are saying is they want investment. That's what your conference is saying. You want investment. The UK Export Finance has a portfolio of 10 billion across the African continent. 1 billion just in the last period. BII investing 100 million just in its portfolio currently this year. So this is not just about development. It's about a profound question, what is development? And I insist that development is about growth, development is about jobs, development is about opportunities, development is about business. That's what I say as a politician in the UK. That is no different in the continent of Africa. It is not about handouts. It cannot be that. That is not development.
This is a wonderful statement in defense of the British policy. I mean, it's fine, but
and look, no, I say this because I have my own family members that send remittances back to family in villages in Guyana. And let us remember that remittances that people send to their families all over the global south, and certainly to this continent, outspends any development spend from any nation. Let us not forget that. African people sending back to their loved ones. Let us multiply that with finance and investment and trade. And I stand by that.
Good. I love this. It's one rare event I see David so excited. And it's a beautiful sight. David, just to continue, there's a small question about the aid. This time is something within your remit, actually. You are in charge of the aid budget, correct?
Yes.
And you cut it down from 7.5. That's fine. We said we complain about the speed, how fast, but fair enough. But is it true that the Home Office raids your budget, take so much out of this money to pay for the housing and whatever they do with illegal refugees, etc.? And to my mind, this is nothing to do with international development. This is a policing activity within the borders of UK. So why you allow the Home Office to come and take, 30-40% of your budget, take it to go to spend it? Look, I mean, this is illegal. And that's your budget. Okay? You need to go and have a fight there.
Mo, it is absolutely the case that we inherited a situation from the last government where they began this process of spending development spend on housing refugees in hotels across the United Kingdom. And we are absolutely committed to reducing that spend.
Yeah.
And of course, that is not the best way to spend those funds. So I am going to concede that that is a problem that we've inherited. I'm afraid it's not a problem that we can fix over 11 months, but it is a problem.
With the Home Secretary, that's it. You said you have no right to take my money. Because this is a policing operation.
The Home Secretary, I think, is in agreement that that is a problem. We are, as a new government, have been in office for 11 months, and so reducing that spend over time is a commitment, but it's not something we could have done overnight because it took some years for the last government to rack up this problem that we have inherited.
Let me ask you maybe the last question so we can open the discussion here. And it will be a mess of me if we have this opportunity here not to tell you something which make all Africans upset about UK. Tarnish your reputation everywhere. Is your visa system. You have the most expensive, you see, those old guys applied and get their visas. It's the most expensive visa in the world. You think you're going to be admitted in paradise, رايح Jannah. And, and then it takes so long, it's so complicated, you have to submit an incredible number of documents. I want to know, do you own your house? I want the purchase agreement of your house. I want your wedding certificate. I want the, excuse me. I mean, why don't you act like a normal country? Now, I don't want you, look, he's not the Home Secretary. In UK, I'm a British citizen also for really transparency. But this gentleman is not charged of visas. It is the Home Office. So I'm not asking you, I'll expect you to answer, but can you promise us here, you go and have a serious discussion with your colleagues in the Home Office and the Cabinet to tell them how people are pissed off with your country because of the visa system?
Look, look, I've just got to just panoptically. I am very aware it's something that informs my politics. My parents arrived in the UK as immigrants. They were part of that generation that rebuilt Britain after the Second World War. And I'm terribly proud of those people that gave so much and took so little. So that's the inheritance, but it is also the case that we have to recognize that we have had in the last government, they lost control, and it is also the case that we've had this small boats crisis. Now, I think it's also the case that the climate catastrophe, the conflict we see, does drive immigration, and it is poor countries in the African continent who bear the brunt of that. And I've been to many refugee camps, and it is important to centre that. We are obviously, we've launched a new portal for our visas that we are attempting to simplify the whole time. Actually, there's a new protocol regime that we've launched at Heathrow Airport for officials and VIPs across the continent included who will arrive in the UK, because I think we have wanted to make that friendlier than it was under the last government. But we have to be robust about the challenges that we experience and about what the British people raise with us as issues. I don't just knock on doors in Tottenham in North London at election time. I knock all over the country. It is an issue that's raised. It is an issue that will determine, in part, the outcome of the next election. And so we do have to be robust on the issue of immigration. But I recognise there will be different room.
Yeah, David, it's something so simple. Many business people want to go to Britain because they have business issues. They are sometimes sick people who have proof fund and going for private treatment, or you have students coming who actually, you know, the universities in UK will be bankrupt without foreign students. And so just the Home Office start from the assumption that every applicant is an illegal asylum seeker, and that is a problem. Please don't be so. Just anyway, I'm not asking you to answer that, but I'm just telling you honestly how do people feel about that issue, and it's really tarnished the brand of UK. It's seen as an insular little island, which is, you know, and sometimes, oh, we are global Britain. How could you be global Britain? Excuse me. You cannot be global Britain and you do that. Anyway, so please pass this the question, and I'm going to open now for questions from our audience, but please, questions and very quickly. Right, the lady here. Can you give her a mic, please? Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Please introduce yourself, sir. I cannot see it. Introduce yourself.
Estelle Youssoufamo. I'm a member of parliament, Mr. Secretary, from France. I wanted to
You're a
ask
member
you
of parliament in
France.
in France.
What you
from
doing here?
Mayotte. I'm enjoying the weather and the discussion.
Okay, I'm joking.
Merci, Mo, for your kind invitation. I just wanted to ask you, because of what you explained about what the UK has to offer to the continent. Mayotte, the district I'm representing, is off the coast between Madagascar and Tanzania. So I am interested. Regarding artificial intelligence, we know the UK organized a summit regarding artificial intelligence. I still consider you as European. Europe is lagging behind in that sector. What do you think you can work on with Africa on that sector, which is the future, and where Africa has so far nothing to put on the table, meaning that as Europeans, Africans are just being taken in terms of data, but they are not main actors. So what do you think you can help with? Thank you.
Right. Shall I take more questions? Answer. You should ask that also of the National Assembly in France. Ask your own MPs there what they're doing. Yeah. Any other?
Yeah.
Only ladies are interested in you.
I'm here.
Okay, other lady. Yeah.
I'm here, Mo. I've got the mic, Mo.
Who?
Trevor
Sorry.
over here. Secretary Lamy, Zimbabwe and the UK have had a difficult relationship. You've just come in. What will it take to bring that relationship to where it was before? What are the sticking issues that need to be addressed by both parties to normalize the engagement? Thank you.
I think I should answer that question instead of you. I think you need to get your act together first before ask for normalization. Until you have a democracy in your country and stop harassing and doing what you're doing to the opposition, you have no right to ask for normalization with anybody.
More right here.
Yes, sorry, lady over there. Yeah?
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, Catherine Stodolka. I'm at the Quadrature Climate Foundation.
Ah, wonderful.
Very nice to see you. Three things. The first is, don't ask me why I'm here. I'm an Aussie, so it's a bit random. But our foundation has provided £10 million into Sudan. I'm here because if there are organisations who are looking for further support, please come and talk to me. Second, I don't know, Foreign Secretary, if you heard the brilliant panel just before this and the one before that, but we had incredible confidence in Africa being an investment destination,
Yeah.
a growth destination. What can we do with conservative City of London bankers, asset managers and pension funds who still look at the continent as an incredibly high-risk destination, despite the incredible data that we've seen today, which shows that there are returns to be made and opportunities? And third, a question for the room: what can philanthropy do? Please come and talk to me. We need to shift this dialogue from one of aid, but we also need that early stage catalytic capital, especially to support
Please, you
entrepreneurs.
should ask one question only. Okay?
It's an offer, Mo. What can philanthropy do?
You want to answer?
I'm going to work backwards. Just on that last question, and Quadrature, led by Greg and Sunil, do an amazing job leveraging philanthropy on climate finance, and I'm very grateful for the work they do. You're absolutely right. The City of London can play a greater role, want to play a greater role. We are, this month, now that we're in June, we will have London Climate Week, and I'm hearing from friends in the US that they are also focusing on London Climate Week. And I think a big part of that is the finance piece. And I'm certainly hosting, I think, 2 events in the City of London on this particular issue. And I do think we cannot continue to be in a place where 3% of climate finance is available for the continent. That is unacceptable. And you know, in coming into this role, one of the figures that most upset me is, despite all of the billions that have been spent on development over the years by countries across the West particularly, billions, 50% of Africans still do not have access to electricity at home. What has happened? So we have to increase the finance. That's a role for the United Kingdom, I think, in terms of our leverage in the World Bank, the IMF, but absolutely the City of London. We recognise there's an opportunity to lead, and alongside Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer, our Business Secretary Johnny Reynolds, the Mayor of London, we intend to absolutely step up to that leadership role. I'm very much looking forward to London Climate Week as our first opportunity since we came to government back in July. There's a big role for philanthropy as well, stepping into the breach alongside governments, because we know that we're going to need private finance. State funds will not be sufficient on the issues, particularly on adaptation and mitigation, that we've got to meet. On the question of Zimbabwe, I do think these issues come back to good governance and come back to democratic norms and come back to the norms set out by organisations like the Commonwealth. There has been, I think, some progress, but when we last looked at these issues a year or so ago, it was not quite enough progress. You've heard what Mo has said, and in a sense, one doesn't say this in any sort of, I don't want to say this in any sort of way that's pejorative. It's on behalf of the people of Zimbabwe that we want to stand alongside. So I hope that you get there. I hope that you get there on their behalf. And AI. The United Kingdom sits just underneath, obviously the leaders are the United States and China, and the United Kingdom is sitting in sort of third, fourth place, and there are other partners in the European Union as well. I think that the first thing is about skills and about expertise, and that's why education in the UK, higher education particularly, partnerships in the continent of Africa are very, very important. I think we can play a big role. I met this morning with Chevening scholars our Chevening scholars make a big difference throughout the continent. I'd actually like to grow the number of scholarships available here in the continent over my period as Foreign Secretary. That's the first thing, higher education. And then there are opportunities, I think, on data, particularly in the storage issues, where I think Africa could play a greater role. For example, it's hugely important that in the leapfrog that we are seeing as a result of AI and then quantum biotech as well to some degree, that we don't see a leapfrog that doesn't give the continent and countries in the continent the opportunity to step up as well. I had a row very early on in this job. It wasn't about AI, it was about something else. Actually, it wasn't in this job, it was when I was Shadow Foreign Secretary. There was a debate, a very necessary debate that I fully understand, about why Western nations had failed to support the continent of Africa with COVID vaccination. I understand that debate. But I tried at the time to question something else in relation to that debate, because I didn't believe that that was the central question. The central question for a country like the UK, with the skills, technology and innovation that we have, is not how can we vaccinate more children in the continent of Africa, whilst that is important. Surely, it is how can we use our leverage to ensure that Africa next time round has its own vaccination capacity. That's what we can do. That's what we've got to get to. That's the question I demand. And it's the same question in relation to issues like AI. How can we use our skills to accelerate that curve? And with the UK standing as absolutely amongst the very best in global science, I think we can do more.
Thank you very much, David. Well done. Thank you. Before we end this, I really like to thank the people who helped us organize this. I don't know if they're here. Rebecca, please give a hand to the people. And I also want to thank the research team who produced a fantastic document, which I hope you take it home and read it carefully. It is really marvelous. Can they stand up, the research team down here? And finally, I really understand, I wish to thank the person who actually spent endless hour organizing this, which is Natalie De La Balme, our CEO. Where is Natalie? And thank you for bearing with us for 2 days. I hope you enjoy yourself. And please give a big hand to this gentleman who was really wonderful today. Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you.